Hi, and welcome to the Give Me a Crown podcast. This is episode 16, and today is Monday, the 23rd of November 2015. My name's Nina, also known as Give Me a Crown across the internet, and it's also the name of my Etsy shop where I sell project bags and zipper pouches. The year's running out very quickly. It feels like 2016's just around the corner, and this week's episode is going to have some knitting, and also I'll share a little bit about a couple of iPad apps that I've been using recently to read knitting patterns so that I've been able to reference the patterns while I've been working on them. I just wanted to mention the Aussie Knit Along that's running along in the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group, and there are 52 finished objects now, which is absolutely stunning. It's great that so many people have been taking the time to work with Australian indie dyed yarns and Australian big brand yarns, as well as Australian designed patterns. So it's running until the end of November, and the end of November is on Monday. So what I thought I would do is I'll actually record late next week rather than on my normal Monday. I'll record on either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on how things go. And that means that anyone who is overseas and happens to be working on Australian patterns or Australian yarn has a chance to get in before the end of their November. And I will aim to close the threads on December 1 here in Australia, but if for some reason I need to record on Wednesday instead, then I'll just close them when I get a chance to. And so if you can sneak in a finished object before I close the thread, then well done to you. There will be prizes for both the finished objects thread and the chatter thread. So all the best with finishing up any projects that you're working on, and I look forward to seeing them. On to finished objects. So my first finished object is my Sounion socks. So these are a free pattern from Kristen Finlay of Skein Yarn. So she's an Aussie designer and indie dyer, and I've been making these socks up for my uncle. They're going to be a Christmas present, so I haven't blocked them yet, but I'll be doing that probably today, and then I can pop them in the post in the next few days so that they get on the way over to him. These are knit with Nobita Statesman Veljesta yarn, which is a Finnish yarn, Seven Brothers it translates as, which is actually I think it was an Aran weight yarn. So I used the 56 stitch version of the pattern, which is made for the patterns for fingering weight yarn, but these have turned out perfectly well as men's size socks. I mentioned, I think it was last week or the week before, that the pattern does a little thing, at least at the 56 stitch version, where you have 2 knit stitches on the gusset on that side, but you have 4 on this side. So if I was knitting this again at the 56 stitch size version, I would shift the pattern across so as to get mirrored socks, I guess. I shifted the pattern or the heel flap 2 stitches along when I was knitting the second sock. So that means, if I can figure this out, both of them have got 2 stitches on opposite sides, so that when they're being worn, regardless of whether they're being worn on which foot, the socks mirror each other. It's just a little detail that no one's going to notice, but I'm happy to have put that in there. So I've mentioned before that the purl stitch is a little bit of a tricky one, but it can be figured out, and it was a fairly fun knit. I did get a little bit tired of the peculiar purl stitch after a while, and I think that might be more so to do with the fact that I was using thicker yarn than fingering weight, so it took a bit of work to get it going. But they're done, so that's fantastic. My second finished object you haven't seen yet, and I know that the Rosehip Knits podcast is having a natural or undyed along or something along those lines. I haven't looked into the full details of it, and I had planned to do some spinning of some undyed fibre, which I'll hopefully get a chance to do before the craft along or knit along runs out, but I need to look at the details. But I knew that I had a few balls or few skeins of yarn from New Zealand that I ordered a few years ago, and it's Naturally Harmony, 100% pure New Zealand merino, 8-ply DK weight. I'm not entirely sure which colours I've used for this particular project because I had 3 skeins and I wound them all up and pulled off the labels, and I haven't gone back to check what's what. But they're these kind of yarns, so I don't know too much about it, but it looks like a single which has just been slightly felted, so I'm not sure if anyone else can figure out how that works or whether it is actually plied, but it doesn't look like there's plies in there. I think it's just one strand, but it's an 8-ply weight, which is what a standard DK weight is called in Australia and I guess New Zealand. And in my wonderful project bag from Sandra from the Craftfulness podcast, I've been working on a little sheep. So this is the Free Fuzzy Mitten Lamb pattern from Ravelry, and it's by Barbara Prime, and it calls for I think it was a worsted weight or an Aran weight yarn, so I went down in my needle sizes to a 3mm needle to use with the 8-ply yarn, just to try to get a dense fabric. And then I've used some buttons for the eyes rather than safety buttons because this is going to an adult. And what else? I think the proportions have turned out a little bit odd, peculiar. The pattern is knit flat, so I did the legs on straight needles for a change and knit them flat and then seam them up, and I decided that I wasn't too keen on lots of seaming, so I converted the pattern into the round for the other parts apart from the ears, which were knit flat. So I think that going between knitting flat and knitting in the round, that sort of affects gauge somewhat, but for some reason it feels like the head is quite small compared to the body and the pattern. But it was a fun pattern, fun to play around with, but as I mentioned, just I had to have a bit of a think about how to get it into the round. I want to try to get a good picture of him for the video thumbnail. Sorry. So this is going to be a housewarming present for someone near and dear to me, so I think they'll appreciate a little sheep. It has some meaning behind the fact that it's a sheep. So he or she, gender to be decided, is finished, and then I have a half object to the little sock. So it doesn't fit very well on the foot, but I made a miniature sock. I don't know yet whether the sock should be worn up, in which case they look like ski boots. Well, you know those boots that people wear when they break their leg. So maybe they'll be rolled down, but I'm knitting those on my short little DPNs. So this is the start of the second sock, and I'm using a Finish Novita Nalle or Bear yarn. So this is just a variegated yarn. I'm really happy with my little sheep, and I have a feeling that I'm going to need to make myself one, because I've made a lot of crochet toys and some knitted toys before, and they've all gone off to kids. And I think I've got my first crochet penguin that I've kept for myself, and I think that's the only one that I've got. I think it's sweet. Slightly disproportionate, but sweet. So that's that. Then other works in progress. I've been putting a bit more of a dent on my sock yarn blanket, and I have a square in progress, so I'm going to see if how I can show this to you. Last week I showed some minis that I was sent by Sandra from the Craftfulness podcast, and I've put a few of those in now. So this first one, this black and purpley one, is a Hedgehog Fibers square. This next one is a Manos del Uruguay square. This variegated one is a Craftfulness square, so that's from Sandra's own yarn. And then I'm doing one more square underneath it from another of Sandra's own yarn, which she sells on her Etsy shop. So that's had a bit of love. And then I've still got a lot of minis to go, which I'll probably be adding in probably this week. We'll see. And my other work in progress is my Arctic texture sock. So this is also as part of the Aussie Knit Along, because it's designed by Linda Pomeranke, I'm pretty sure. If I get that wrong, I'll make sure to put a note in there. These, I have a feeling I'm not going to actually get finished in time for the end of the knit along, but I've already knit quite a few Aussie items, so I'm sure you'll forgive me. But these are going to be Christmas socks. I've already finished one, and this is the second one, and I made myself a little DPN holder last week, so this was just to try out a size and see how it fits. So I've got that much done. I think I've got about one and a little bit repeats of the pattern before I start the gusset, and the only reason that I haven't made more progress is that I've actually had a lot of random things going on, and it requires a little bit of concentration, so I have to have the iPad app with the pattern in it open while I'm working on it to make sure that I'm knitting the pattern correctly. So I just haven't had a chance to do much of that this week, but they will get done for Christmas, so that will be fine. So on to the iPad apps. So I mentioned the other week that I had looked out for some apps that I could use for helping me keep track of my patterns. I don't often print them out. I guess I just don't like using paper if possible, and I don't know whether the electricity used by an iPad app is really any better, but perhaps it is. I do print some patterns out. I think especially if I've been working on a larger garment, then I print them out so that I can write my notes on it and do calculations and modifications on it. But the first iPad app that I picked up was one that I wasn't sure if it was actually going to work, because I have an iPad and I think it had been released quite a few years ago and hadn't had any updates, so I was a little bit worried about downloading it in case it was buggy. But it seems to be working. So it's called JKnit HD Lite, and it's actually a free app, and I haven't played with it a great deal, but you basically have a PDF library, and from your email or from the web browser, if you view a PDF, you can then send it to this program and open it up. So I'll show you the Sounion socks pattern because that's a free one and I'm not giving anything away. But what it allows you to do is highlight a row, and then you double click each time to move it. Now you'll see that the highlight is kind of falling out of sync with the row, so you can actually edit the height of the highlight bar, and it'll sort of be easier to keep track. You can also manually shift it to the right place. It took a little bit of playing to figure that out, and the issue that I've had with it is that the bar goes across the whole of the row. So when I was working on the Arctic Texture socks, the pattern has two columns of the same lace pattern, so I was having to remember which side of the pattern I was working on, and then I could look at my knitting and figure out which side I was on, but it just took a little bit more time because from what I can see you can't adjust the width of the bar. But it works, it's free, and as I said, I haven't played with it much more, and there is a paid version which possibly has all sorts of other amazing features. The other app that I got last week was one that I saw on Instagram. Somebody mentioned that it was available for free last week, and they said that normally it's around 10 Australian dollars, so I can't now see how much it was or is because I've downloaded it already, but it might still be free when you're seeing this podcast, so it's worth checking out. It's called PDF Expert, just down there, and it's just a PDF reader, but it has a whole heap of features. I haven't looked into all of them yet, and it's not technically for knitting patterns, but you can use it that way. So I'll show you this on the Fuzzy Mitten Lamb pattern because again that's a free one, but the way that I've been using it is that it allows you to draw things onto the screen, and I sort of draw a square and then just shift it down for each row that I'm working on. That seems to be working okay for me. It also allows you to write notes onto the PDF, so if something says work 9 rows, I create a little text box and I write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then I delete one of the numbers each time I finish a row. There are plenty of better ways to keep track of rows obviously, but yeah, it works. That's how I've been using it. I haven't yet had to write any other particular notes or highlights, but it looks like a pretty powerful app for working with PDFs. So that's PDF Expert, and I think that's probably the one that I'm going to be using for the next little while. I know that there are other knitting apps out there, so if you have any recommendations, then I'll set up an episode thread in the Ravelry group, and I'd love to hear any suggestions and see what other people are using. I think something to keep track of rows is what I'm most interested in at the moment, but I'm also keen on getting myself a circa counter, which is one of those little clock style, I think they're plastic little things with the hands, so you can shift them around a little dial to keep track of repeats and rows and things. So I think perhaps along with the PDF Expert and a circa counter, then I probably wouldn't need anything else, but if there is something out there, then I'd love to hear about it and give it a try. And I think that's it. There's been no acquisitions this week, but I did make a note in the Ravelry group that Bendigo Woolen Mills has brought back the sock yarn that they had for sale last year, the bear one that I've been doing some dyeing with. So I might have put in a bit of an order for some of those. It is a thicker than fingering weight yarn. I think it's almost pretty much a sport weight because it's 300 meters to 100 grams, but it's 75% merino, 25% nylon, so it wears well, and I have intentions of doing more dyeing once I get those, and I might have also bought my cardigan quantity of yarn as well, so I'll show those when they arrive. I've got one particular cardigan in mind that I'm waiting to see the absolutely perfect colourway from one of the Australian indie dyers in a sport weight yarn, and that's my other main purchase over the upcoming holiday season that I'm waiting to do. But I have a couple of other cardigans in mind, so I thought that the Bendigo Woolen Mills is a good value and hardy wool yarn, so I'm looking forward to getting those. I think that's it, yeah. So just a reminder that next week's episode will be a little bit late, possibly Tuesday or Wednesday. I may be popping out of town for a few days, so that sort of all ties in together. Oh, something I forgot to mention. A few weeks ago I showed a colourwork pouch that I was making for my grandmother for our milestone birthday. So I sent it off, and I was keeping my fingers crossed that it would arrive before her birthday, and it did. And the uncle that that I was knitting the Sounion socks for, he contacted me a few days before her birthday party, and she thought that she was just getting cake and coffee, but they had actually arranged a large haul and a big get-together of her children and children's children and a few of the great-grandchildren. So he suggested doing a video call, a Skype call, and so the other day they buzzed me in and then went and told her that she had a phone call, and she came along to the computer and was a little bit stunned and had tears in her eyes because she saw me, and that was very, very special. She'd never done a Skype or video call before, so it was, even though I was on the other side of the world, it was wonderful to get the chance to be a part of her celebrations and to hear how much she loved the pouch that I sent her. And I got to see a big stream of all my relatives, which was fantastic, and they showed me, they took the computer out the window and showed me the snow up in Lapland. So it's heartbreaking to be on the other side of the world when things like that happen, but it was fun to be a head on a computer screen on the other side of the world, getting getting the chance to chat to them, and it makes me want to go to Finland again. But I'm rambling now, and yes, so I was saying that next week's episode will be possibly a little bit late, and I might be out of town just helping with the house move. So yep, that's it. I hope you're having a lovely week, and I'll see you soon.